You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas. Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And welcome back to another fun-filled and scintillating episode of Mind Over Murder.
It's scintillating, is it? I like it.
It is scintillating.
That's a good word.
And I'm in a very good mood because, as Bill mentioned, it is Friday and I am on spring break. Woo-woo. Woohoo. So we'd like to start by talking to you about a really stupendous solve from our friends at Othram. We are so proud of the work that they do always, but this one is pretty spectacular. They just announced the solve of the woman who had been known for a long time as Grace Doe. Grace because the investigators at one point said that this case would only be solved by the grace of God. Well, the McDonald County, Missouri investigators teamed up with Othram and several other agencies to get this one done. In December of 1990, a young woman, we do not know how old, the reporting just says young woman, was found hogtied and dumped next to an abandoned farmhouse. She had been murdered approximately 2 months prior to her discovery. She was also sexually assaulted as well. The interesting thing about this particular situation is she was restrained with 6 different types of bindings: nylon and lead rope, coaxial cable, phone cable, paracord, military-grade paracord, I should say, and clothesline. For over 30 years, she was the only unidentified missing person for McDonald County. And after much work and effort from various agencies, including Othram, they were finally able to reach a name for Grace Doe, and her name is Shauna Beth Garber. She was ultimately identified when a half-sister was given genetic testing, and she revealed she had been looking for her missing sister for the past 28 years. So finally, Danielle Garber has answers, and Shauna Beth Garber has her name back.
And from what we're reading, apparently Shauna and her sister were in the foster care system, and the 2 young girls were split up and ended up being fostered by different families, so they'd lost touch. It's an amazing story in that Shauna's sister's been looking for her for all of these years. It looks like Shauna was probably in her early 20s when she was found murdered, and law enforcement in Missouri has been trying to figure out her identity. And it's not until Othram's new technology came along that they were able to extract DNA from her remains, I think from her bones, and then use forensic genealogy to backtrack, which ultimately led to her half-sister.
And there is so much to this case. There is facial reconstruction involved, dental records, microscopic analysis, an anthropology department gets in there too, that we are going to ultimately cover this case on an upcoming episode featuring David Middleman. So we're not going to go into too much more of it now. But bravo to our friends at Othram Labs. That is an amazing solve. We are so proud of the team there.
I also thought it was really cool that students who were studying anthropology and forensics got involved with their professors. It's a pretty cool story. Now, This doesn't solve what happened to Shauna,
right?
But as we've talked about before in other unidentified cases, if you don't know who someone is, you stand next to no chance of being able to figure out who killed them. In this example, at least now we know who this young lady is, and then hopefully now law enforcement can again work backwards to see if they can figure out what was happening to Shauna in 1990.
And we're looking forward to seeing where that case goes from here.
A future episode with David will be no doubt fascinating because of all the cases that they're breaking.
Oh, yeah.
They have told us confidentially that they have a number of additional announcements coming. Mm-hmm. That's as far as we can take it at this point, but they're working on some fascinating cases, and they're waiting for the go-ahead from law enforcement to make announcements. They're doing some phenomenal work, working with law enforcement agencies around the country and in Canada as well.
And if you are interested in the work that David and their team are doing, make sure that you do follow their social media pages for Othram Labs, because they are always, it feels like they're always making announcements. They're doing some big breaks here recently. So if you are interested in those cases and you want to get a little more than what we can offer, follow Othram on social media.
Absolutely. And then a number of their cases where public funding is not available, they do crowdfund. So if we all make contributions, which Kristin and I have both done, to help offset the expenses involved, it helps move these cases forward. So they are always looking for people who are willing to contribute their DNA to DNAsolves.com, where it's used by law enforcement, as well as making a small financial contribution to help these cases move forward towards resolution. It's pretty exciting.
Very, very much.
Another thing we'd like to ask your consideration in getting involved in, we've talked a lot about how important reviews are. We've got a nice little promotion going on with our friends at Podchaser. And if you look on our social media pages and in the notes for this episode, there is a promotion going on currently. If you would take a few minutes and write a review about Mind Over Murder or any of your favorite podcasts on Podchaser, they will make a contribution to Meals on Wheels, an organization we very much support. So this is a win-win-win situation here in that you write a great review for your friends at Mind Over Murder or other favorite podcasts. They'll take as many reviews as you'd like to write, and they'll make a contribution for every single review you take a minute to write on Podchaser, and then they'll make a contribution to Meals on Wheels. It's something we'd very much appreciate your saying something nice about us.
Yes, please. Yes, please. And remember, your reviews do not have to be long. My students are always asking me, how long does this have to be? It doesn't have to be long at all, just a couple of sentences. But we appreciate it, and we know that Meals on Wheels would appreciate it as well. So thank you in advance.
It's not like a term paper assigned to you by Miss Dilley, your English teacher who cracks the whip and makes you work so hard. A few lines is all you really need.
Yes, a few nice lines. If you can get them grammatically correct and nicely spelled, that's even better. But you know,
said the English teacher.
Yeah. Like, not even our reviews anyway. It's 2021.
Well, as always, as we've mentioned, reviews are extremely important, and we very much appreciate them on your favorite podcast platform as well as on Podchaser.
We wanted to call your attention to some information that we have put up on our various social media pages. That would be here on Mind Over Murder and also on our Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page and Bill's personal page. Bill has a Twitter feed. I do not, but Bill posts all the information that we share on our various platforms. You may have noticed the familiar name of Andy Fox, one of our former guests here on the pod, who has been reporting on the Colonial Parkway murders case since 1986. Andy just put out an interesting bit of reporting. We did get a bit of a tip-off that this was going to happen. Andy did some interesting reporting in which he laid out what we think is a pretty strong case for connecting the individual homicides of Brian Pettinger and Laurie Ann Powell into the Colonial Parkway murders. And this is something that we have considered a number of times just among ourselves and people familiar with the case. Andy did some excellent reporting on it, both in print, as in on the WAVY site, and a piece that aired on WAVY TV 10. We have posted it on our Facebook page for both of our platforms, and we do urge you to take a look at it because it is excellent reporting, and we would love to know your thoughts as to whether Brian Pettinger and Laurie Ann Powell are part of the Colonial Parkway murders.
Then, of course, he asks a really provocative question, which is, could these two cases be part of the Colonial Parkway murders? It's an interesting question, as Kristin said. Definitely worth checking out.
In addition to our various social media platforms, we do have two websites that you can go to, mindovermurderpodcast.com, for all of the information that you need and want about our podcast. You can also go to colonialparkwaymurderers.com for all of the information that you need about the Colonial Parkway murders case. And that site is being constantly updated with new media links. So we do encourage you to go there and take a look and do a little bit of exploring to see what you can find. Thank you so much for listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time. And we're joined today by Teri, Hailey, Holman, and Paula, Meehan, older sisters of Cassandra, Hailey. Teri and Paula, thank you so much for joining us on Mind Over Murder.
Thanks for having us.
We'd like to go ahead and start out by getting you to just tell us a little bit about your sister, Cassandra.
Well, what would you like to know?
Well, first,
what kind of person was she? How would you characterize her?
Oh, she was genuine, giving,
fun.
Yeah, she was just special. She would light up a room. I know everybody says that about their loved one once they're gone, but she really would. She never saw the bad of anyone or anything. She always saw the good.
I think there's a vibrant quality about her.
Yeah.
I even in the photographs, she just has this sort of vivacious, bubbly.
Yeah.
There's an upbeat quality to her. She just looks like she's fun and smart and ready for anything in the photographs.
She was very
loving life.
Stylish too.
Very stylish.
In the 80s at that.
No, I know. I mean, and people love, the outfit. We sort of preserve her a little bit through these really wonderful photographs. We were just talking about this offline. A lot of us who don't know your sister, we refer to her sometimes as Cassandra or Sandra or Sandy, and yet you all seem to call her by another nickname.
Yes. We call her Missy.
What's the origin of the Missy story? Where does that come from?
I wish we
know that we know. I really don't know that we know.
I think we've been calling her that since she was probably 2 or 3, and nobody really knows where it came from, but we called her that till the day she disappeared.
But
we have a hard time calling her anything but that.
But your friends often call her Sandy. So it's really kind of a Hailey family thing, is it not?
Yes.
It is. Yeah. I think, we kind of referred to her as Miss Press and that kind of stuff. And then it just got shorter and shorter. We were older. She was young, much younger than us. She was 6 years younger than me and 8 years younger than Teri. So, we just called her Miss Press.
Was it
and then
fun?
It just turned to Missy.
Was it fun for you all to have a significantly younger sister? I mean, when you were getting a little bit older, she's still a little kid on some level, isn't she?
She felt like my baby.
Oh, isn't that funny?
Yeah. My mom worked, so I was the built-in babysitter. So she felt like my kid in a lot of ways.
I think I can understand that. So tell us a little.
Yeah, I didn't feel like she and I were 6 years apart, really. I mean, I felt closer to her, especially after Teri moved out of the house, because Teri's 2 years older than me. So she moved out at like 18. And so it was just Missy and I together. So I never felt like she was super young, like to me, and that she wasn't 6 years younger than me. I didn't feel that way.
No, she was a lot more mature for her age.
I was just about to ask that. What was her, her personality like, her social life like?
It was big. She had a lot. Well, from a young age, she did gymnastics. So she always had a lot of girlfriends, and then cheerleading through high school, middle school even, I think. And so she always had a lot of girlfriends. And so she was always doing something. And when she disappeared, she was working a couple of jobs, going to school at CNU, and then
I think she was coaching somebody.
Yeah, she was coaching gymnastics.
I think it was.
Was that same year? Yeah, so she was busy, very social.
And do you think her being a little more grown up, was that because she had 2 older sisters and she kind of emulated the 2 of you?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think I have an only child, and he doesn't seem, he seemed to mature less because he didn't have any older role models. So maybe that is the case. That she had
I never thought about
siblings.
Is it true, Paula, that when Teri moved out of the house that you guys celebrated and said, I couldn't wait for her to get out of here. Now we can take over the place? New rules? We're in charge. Is that true?
I don't know that. Well, it was 3 girls sharing 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, so we were probably pretty happy about that. But I do, then Sandra and I had our own rooms when Teri left. So, but I do remember, we at the end of the night, we'd still sleep in the same room for a while. And we'd fall asleep in the same room. Someone would wake up or something like that. It wasn't that. It wasn't like I was glad to get rid of Teri.
And Teri, we're totally
your own space
teasing.
Was nice.
We are totally teasing.
That's okay.
She was probably happier.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah, you want to comment further, Teri, or is that enough?
So in 1988, can you kind of place us in time? How old were each of you, if you don't mind revealing that? What were you all doing in terms of jobs and school and things like that? Just kind of place us for people who aren't necessarily familiar with all the particulars. What was going on in 1988 for you all?
Oh my gosh. I don't know how old I was. I can do the math.
You were 26.
I was working in Williamsburg, and I was no longer with Newport News. I was in Williamsburg. I had come down to take Mom and Dad out to dinner. I was living in Gloucester and had come to take Mom and Dad out to dinner that night.
And you had a background in law enforcement, correct?
Right.
How many years did you do with the Newport News Police Department?
I was there from 81 to 84, and then with the government for a couple of years.
Paula, you were in school?
No, I'd graduated. I was working. I was living in an apartment in Hampton with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, Teri, you're kind of uniquely qualified on some level to talk about Sandy's disappearance and the Colonial Parkway murders in general, because you're the only one of us that has a law enforcement background.
As short as it was, yes.
Although you had the training and the background,
right.
You'd actually worked as an officer.
Right. And those first days there, I saw lots of mistakes.
Mm. Tell us a little bit about that. You were starting to tell us a little bit about that evening, if you don't mind.
Mom and Dad, we took them to dinner. Well, I was at the house waiting to take them to dinner, and we were waiting for Sandra and Keith to go to the movies, waiting for Keith to pick her up. And he came, and we all met him. He talked to my mom, said that he would have her home. I think it was around 2-ish. They said they were going to a movie and then to the party at CNU, and they left.
What was your impression of Keith when you met him?
He seemed clean-cut, straight-up kid. I wasn't alarmed about anything.
And that was a first date in terms of the two of them going out to the movies.
Yes.
and the party.
And how did Keith and Sandy actually meet? Do you know?
I think they had a class together at school.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's right.
Okay. So they left and you took your parents out to dinner?
Right. And we were gone for a couple hours, dropped them back off, went home. And the next day I had well water at my house in Gloucester. So I wanted to wash my car. So I went back to Mom's house all the way from Gloucester to wash my car at my mom and dad's house. Just running up and down the road. And, it's before cell phones. And I was driving and I thought maybe I'll stop and get donuts on the way. And just something was kind of gnawing at me to hurry up and get to Mom's house. And I'm pulling in the driveway and my mom meets me in the driveway and Dad's right behind her. And she's not making sense at first. She said, "Can you call your friend Gloria and get her to bring her K-9 unit out? She's missing and I need her to see if she can find her." And I'm like, why am I going to call Gloria if Gloria is missing? And it didn't make sense to me. So I'm like, what? And she said, your sister didn't come home last night, and they called me from the park service. They found her wallet or her checkbook or something. And I said, oh, now I know why she wants me to call Gloria. And I said, okay, well, slow down and tell me again. So she told me again that they found her checkbook, but not her wallet. And that's how they got her phone number to call, because it's printed on her checks.
Right.
So I said, well, I'll try and reach Gloria and see what she could do.
And was Gloria a police officer?
She was with Newport News. She had a K-9 unit.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, she couldn't take her dog to the Parkway.
Right. Because that's federal property and outside of Newport News. What time would you say this was? Is this mid-morning, midday?
This is probably 9:30 in the morning by this time.
And so your parents are incredibly worried because Sandy never came home. Had they reached out to Keith's family? I mean, it wasn't like they knew the calls or anything like that.
They didn't have any information.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at the time, they weren't saying that they didn't find Keith either. They just said that they had Sandra's number. That's all they said.
And then, Paula, where were you during all of this? What was your first inkling that something had gone wrong?
So I don't remember what time it was, but I guess around 10. Were you there, Teri? Were you at home when Mom called me, or were you at their house?
I'm not sure.
So I think it was I'm guessing between 9:30 and 10, something like that my mom had called and said, I need you to come to the house. And I said, oh, what's up? And she didn't want to tell me. And then I said, you need to tell me what's going on. Because, I mean, it's maybe a 20, 25-minute drive. You don't want to just sit there and wonder what it could be. So she told me that Missy hadn't come home that night. And I was like, And she didn't call, which in our family, we could stay out as long as we called and said that we weren't coming home. That was really kind of the only rule we had, was that you needed to know what it was, where you were staying, who you were with. And so when she said she hadn't called and hadn't come home, I was a little concerned.
But we kind of thought maybe she just fell asleep and didn't call at first.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But she didn't tell me about finding the wallet or anything like that over the phone. I think I was at the house by time, not the wallet, the checkbook. I was at home when I got those. That's the story of what was going on. I don't remember it's so funny because it's like a blank of like the next 5 years. You don't remember a whole lot.
Remember exactly what the day was like.
Right. But I don't remember if I saw you when I got to the house, or had you already gone to the Parkway?
I think I was home, because remember we were standing outside and then Mr. Devon came over.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because they were telling us to stay away from the Parkway at first. They were telling us not to come up there. And then I got impatient. I was like, to hell with this, I'm going.
Right. Yeah. I remember that.
Were you surprised by the fact that her checkbook had been found on the Parkway? Like, what was her relationship like with the Parkway? Were you surprised to hear that her checkbook had been found on the Parkway?
I was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I can't say definitely that Sandy hated the Parkway or anything like that, but her whole life never even consisted at that part of beyond our house. Everything else was CNU, where she worked, all was in a total opposite direction.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after these messages. One of the most frequent questions we're asked here at Mind Over Murder is, how can I help?
Thanks to Othram, a leading forensic DNA testing lab for law enforcement, you can get involved and help solve real cases.
If you have tested at a consumer genetics company, you can contribute your data to DNAsolves.com. The process is easy and confidential. Just 2 simple steps. Your DNA might be the missing piece that helps solve the identity of an unknown person.
Then Mind Over Murder will highlight cases Othram is working on to seek your crowdfunding support for DNA testing to help solve these cold cases.
Upload your DNA profile to DNAsolves.com. It's easy, free, and confidential.
Then join Mind Over Murder as we help families find answers with Othram and DNAsolves.com.
Welcome back to Mind Over Murder.
To go to the Parkway was like 20 minutes past our house, 25 minutes past our house. So knowing she was at the movies and they didn't have a movie theater in York County at the time, there's no way that she would have gone past her house.
Home. Right.
Yeah.
Knowing that she would have been going home.
Yeah. I don't even remember her ever going there as a place to party because school wasn't that way. College wasn't that way. None of her jobs were that way that I remember. It just, her friends were more, I just don't remember that.
I don't even remember her hanging out at the beach.
You mean along the Parkway when you say that?
Well, Yorktown Beach.
Yorktown Beach.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
For what it's worth, people have spent an incredible amount of time discussing with Kristin and me and online, and everybody's got ideas and theories and that sort of thing about under what circumstances Sandy and Keith would end up on the Colonial Parkway. And what Kristin and I have said over and over again is it's 20 minutes out of the way if they're ending up at a party at Christopher Newport University, which is in Newport News, and they're heading back to the Grafton area where your parents lived. Going 20 minutes out of their way beyond your parents' house doesn't seem to make any sense, does it?
It doesn't. Does not.
No. Especially
and
if
the place the car was parked doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So if you think about like this too, Bill, Keith lived in Gloucester. So he's passing Sandy's house 20 minutes, taking her back 20 minutes, then going another 20 minutes to get to the Gloucester Bridge before he gets over and goes to Gloucester. It just
none of this idea of them ending up on the Parkway makes any sense from your perspective.
Not to me.
What about this idea? We know the car is found at this little Half Moon pull-off, the York River overlook. Can you talk about that setting? Teri, you went up there. What was going on when you arrived later that morning or midday?
There were people walking all around the car, looking in the car, touching stuff in the car, not treating it as a crime scene whatsoever. And it just was just awful. And I approached the park ranger that was supposed to be in charge and said, you realize that you're contaminating a potential crime scene? And he's told me to step back. And I said, well, why don't you step back? You're touching everything in that car and you're letting everybody walk all over this crime scene. And he said, well, I believe they're in the water. I believe they drowned. And I said, there's no way. There's no way my sister went in that water. And I said, and if you think they walked all that way naked, you're crazy. They didn't do it. And there's no way somebody could walk down that cliff without clothes on or shoes on. It's just no way. And nobody went swimming in that water last night. The water's cold. And they just wouldn't hear anything different.
What was the weather like that night in April?
It was chilly.
Mm-hmm. Maybe in 40s. Maybe, yeah, it was cold that night. There's no way they were going, especially at 1 a.m. I mean,
well, I've said this.
Never made sense.
I've said this before. I don't care, even if they were drinking, why would you end up in a pull-off with a steep 25 or 30-foot drop, very steep and rocky? I mean, they're basically on a little cliff.
A sober person could not make it down that cliff.
In the dark? It
not
makes
even in daylight.
Yeah, it makes no sense whatsoever. And there are other areas, if they went a few hundred yards, I think in either direction, where you actually could. I know there's one spot that I've been to. Kristin took me there, where you could pull your car up on the grass and hop down onto a little sandy beach. It wasn't a big beach, but in other words, if you were going to go in the water. You've both said different things about Sandy's aversion to the water and swimming where she couldn't see the bottom. Can you explain how she felt about that?
Well, we both have it. If we can't see the bottom, we're not getting in. I have it. I don't know where she got hers. I got mine from being stung by a man of war. So I don't even get in the water in the dark, even if it's a pool, because I freak myself out. But we just don't like water. We can't see the bottom.
And this would have been 1 o'clock in the morning or later. And
right.
It just doesn't make any sense. So
no.
How did you respond to this idea that this park ranger's putting out that we think they went in the water and drowned?
It's inappropriate for air.
There's the Teri we know and love. Who are these other people, Teri? When you talk about other people at the scene walking around, did you know who they were?
I don't know who they were. It was just tons of people walking all over the place. I don't even know who they were. If they were search people, because there was just people just showing up. I don't know who they were. There were several different park rangers. There were people in civilian clothes. And then they were trying to get search and rescue people. And just everybody was just walking up.
Was there anyone from the Call family there at that point?
I believe there was.
Although you didn't know the Call family. In other words, I know you met them later, but unless you introduced yourselves to each other, you wouldn't have necessarily even recognized the Call parents or siblings.
Right. We probably wouldn't have known.
Somehow I think I knew who they were, but I don't know how. I don't remember how I knew, but I think I did know.
Was anyone from the FBI there at that point?
No, they didn't come for a day or two. And I think they just heard about it by mistake. I think they heard a news report about them dragging the river, and they realized that it was on federal property and put the two and two together and just showed up and took over. They weren't called in.
Don't you think that's odd, Teri, considering we're not here to talk about Kathy and Becky's case, but a young couple, lesbian couple, had been murdered a year and a half prior. I don't know. What do you think that is? 2 miles?
Mile, maybe.
I don't even think it's 2 miles.
Yeah, it's like a mile.
Yeah.
Don't you find it odd that the National Park Service wouldn't call the FBI to at least discuss it with them?
I'm not going to call it odd. I'm going to call it something else, probably not appropriate for air. It's just a lack of training, lack of I don't know what to call it.
Were you able to touch base with any of your former colleagues at the Newport News Police Department, even though it was outside their area of jurisdiction, to get any insight? Did they have any advice?
I did. They because the last place that they were seen was in Newport News.
Right.
They did investigate some, and they ran down a lot of leads, and I had friends that did work on the side with us and chased down as much as they could. But at some point, they got called off by the FBI, and there was a power struggle, and nobody wanted to work together.
How did this power struggle manifest itself?
I'm not absolutely sure. I just know that between York County, Newport News, State Police, the FBI, and it just began to be a power struggle, and nobody was sharing information, and it just got kind of ugly. So Newport News pulled out, York County pulled out, and it just their help just stopped.
So the other agencies withdrew from their support
assistance,
their support role. So then who was left leading the investigation into Sandy and Keith's disappearance?
FBI.
And National Park Service police involved? The Rangers were...
No.
Can we talk about something that's come up a lot, and there's been a tremendous amount of discussion about this in the past few months even? The removal of the clothing from Keith's Toyota Celica. What do we know about what articles of clothing were there and what happened to them, to the best of your recollection?
Yeah, I didn't know about the clothes being missing until the book came out. I knew that Mr. Call, when he saw the car that morning, did not see any clothes in the car. But I know when I got there, I saw clothes strewn all over the car.
In the back seat? In
the back seat. And I'm like, how in the world did he miss those? They're obviously there.
And were the clothes...
So it always befuddled me how in the world you could miss those.
And were the clothes obviously, I mean, were you able to get a look at them? Did you know they were
there?
And you knew these were Sandy's clothes and Keith's clothes?
Well, I didn't remember what he was wearing, but I knew that they were hers.
Right. You saw things you recognized.
Yes.
Does it strike you as odd then that Mr. Call, when he stopped by earlier on his way to Anheuser-Busch, on his way to work, and he said he's passed on, but, he told his family that he had stopped and looked at the car and taken a look inside the car. I don't think he spent a tremendous amount of time there because he was on his way to work. And I don't know about anybody else, but I don't have that much extra time built into my commuting time if I'm on my way to first shift. You don't think he would have missed all the clothing that you saw? What did you hear later when the book came out about this story about the clothing being removed?
That the park rangers removed them.
How does that make any sense?
It doesn't, but Paula's theory makes a lot of sense.
Paula, tell us about your theory about why the park rangers might have removed the clothing.
Yes, I just thought about, I think I was listening to your podcast and you guys were discussing.
Well, thank you.
And it was you and I think Andy Fox or some, and I said, I wonder if they thought that the kids had gone swimming. So I was wondering if they thought the kids had gone swimming and were trying to be, shits and take the clothes. So if they came back, that their clothes wouldn't be there. Who would leave their clothes that far from where you're skinny dipping? It doesn't make any sense to me.
So you're go ahead.
They were trying to get the kids' identity information. There was no reason to take their clothes.
Take the clothes, right. It doesn't make any sense.
So your theory, Paula, is that they took the clothes to be nasty. In other words, to give the kids a hard time.
To make them drive home naked.
Yeah.
So like
maybe not drive home naked, but come look at us. And, I can't think of any other reason you would need to take the clothes to identify somebody. You have their checkbook, obviously. So it doesn't make any sense.
It's an interesting theory. Kristin, what do you think?
No, I like it. It definitely feels very much, like a you darn kids, sort of thing. Especially because Bill and I have learned from certain law enforcement people who shall remain nameless. The Parkway was kind of like the Wild West back then, and I'm sure that NPS had their hands full of people trespassing or partying or doing whatever. It actually, as soon as he mentioned your theory to me the other day, I was like, that makes sense. That makes so much sense. If you're a fed up park ranger who's, having to clean up after these darn kids, I can see them kind of nasty and being like, yeah, well, let's see how they like this.
Yeah.
I can definitely.
I can't think of any other reason that you would take the clothes.
Yeah.
It's funny, taking Missy's checkbook with her address and phone number that back in the day, those were imprinted on the checks. That makes perfect sense if you're actually trying to find two missing young people. But the clothes, Paula, your theory is as good or better as any I've heard, because I couldn't figure out if they're supposedly looking for the kids, then clothing isn't going to help you. A wallet, a driver's license, a checkbook with someone's address and phone number, those are the kind of things that are going to help you find someone or at least reach their loved ones. The clothes, it never made any sense.
And they already have the registration from Keith's car to contact his family. Mm-hmm. So they were only trying to reach Missy's family. So
find information about it. Right.
Do you know then if her wallet went missing? Do we know if she was
her wallet is not there.
Now, I've seen photographs from the crime scene photos, and I can clearly see a woman's purse on the passenger seat of
the purse is there. I saw the purse.
And you saw it there that day?
Yes. Because it used to be my purse. I gave it to her.
Ah, okay. Sister sharing. I like that. But then her wallet, as far as you know...
It's not there.
So it's funny, one of the through lines, and we don't know if these cases are related or not, one of the through lines of discussion in the television series was all about wallets. Sometimes they're open, sometimes they appear to be placed in such a way that someone might be reaching for a driver's license. So to be specific, in Sandy's example, her wallet went missing, and so we don't have her driver's license or other ID, credit cards, if she had any money. Those things are not found in this particular example.
Right.
And Keith's wallet is there, because it's actually visible in some of the shots.
Right.
It's kind of curious.
It is curious. What do we know about the party that Keith and Sandy had been to earlier that night? I know you had mentioned that Newport News kind of lent a hand in running down some leads. Were any of those leads linked to the party? Can you tell us about what you've learned about the party over the years?
No. I mean, they interviewed a lot of people that were at the party. My mom and dad hired private investigators to come back and interview a lot of the kids that were at the party. And all that was handed over to the FBI.
Okay.
But I don't know what information was in it.
And then how did things unfold then in the first few weeks? Was someone from FBI or National Park Service keeping your family informed? Did they give you any kind of updates in terms of
I'll tell you the update I got from John Mabry, the first agent on the case. We'll wait till fall when hunting season starts and somebody will come across them.
He actually said that.
He said that to me.
God.
And I said, well, I'd like to know when they started hunting in the Park Service and the parkland, because as far as I know, you can't hunt up there.
Did you have additional contact with John Mabry and other FBI agents in those first few months?
After he said that to me, I never wanted to talk to him again.
Do you say this in front of your parents?
No, he said that to me at my workplace.
From a family perspective, I mean, I know the two of you weren't, little kids. You were young women at that point. Who from your family was interacting with law enforcement, if anyone?
Mostly me and my mom at the time.
Because you worked in law enforcement and had friends on the force and police officers talk, what was the scuttlebutt? What were your former colleagues from Newport News and other agencies, what were they saying?
Oh, there's a lot of different theories. But for the most part, they were saying that they thought it was either a police officer or somebody pretending to be one.
So this idea of a law enforcement officer or an imposter was definitely part of the mix in their example as well.
Yes.
And at that point, when that scuttlebutt started going around, were Keith and Sandy's disappearance being linked to Robin and David and Kathy and Becky at that point? Like, were these being considered all similar cases, or were they still standalone events?
No, they were thinking they were connected, but nobody wanted to say that officially for a long time.
So that was not said publicly?
No. Oh, no.
For what reason?
For years, it was not said.
Our understanding from interviewing the former FBI special agents in charge is that by the time we get to Sandy and Keith's disappearance, that the FBI recognized that there was a problem. In other words, that when David and Robin went missing and then were found shot to death at Ragged Island, as we understand it, no one was really making the connection between the first incident, Kathy and Becky on the Parkway, and the second incident, Robin and David at Ragged Island. But by the time we get to Sandy and Keith disappearing a mile or so away from the first incident, at that point, according to our former FBI special agents in charge, both of them, they both said, we realized we had a problem. But interestingly, Teri, you're saying that they weren't saying that publicly.
No, they were not.
What were they saying publicly about Sandy and Keith's disappearance?
I'd have to pull out the newspaper articles to really tell you for sure, but they weren't saying serial killer. They would say everything but that. They would dance around that title. So
they were still talking about a missing young couple,
right,
on a first date, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they wouldn't say that they were linked. They would avoid saying it. They would not say serial killer.
What were your parents' observations? I know hope springs eternal, but how are they reacting to this whole thing unfolding as the months went by?
Oh, my mom held up hope for many years.
It's funny.
Probably the first 15 years.
Maybe even longer, because when we first met, we were figuring this out earlier today. We first met 11 years ago, and I remember meeting the two of you and your mom, and we actually went out for drinks afterwards. I don't know if you remember this, at the hotel we were staying at.
Yeah,
after 5 hours with the FBI getting a briefing, we actually went out and had some cocktails at the bar. And I remember your mom still, expressing that hope, which I understand from a mother's perspective, that somehow, some way they would walk through the door again.
Oh, well, I still hope that. Even though my mind knows better, I still hope it.
Right. I think it's a head heart thing, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, common sense tells me it's probably and more than likely never going to happen, but it doesn't mean I don't look for her in weird places. Stranger things have happened.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I remember Mom and Dad were still living on Marine Circle, and we were all, I think that's where we were now. I'm pretty sure that's where we were. And we all ended up, it was years and years later, but we had all ended up having the conversation. And probably don't have this in the case where a person is no longer missing, but we all had the same dream.
Oh, we were at my house.
Wow.
Were we at your house? I couldn't remember
at my house.
We had none of us
you
had
and
talked
Dad.
about. Yeah. All three of us have the exact same dream. And that is that she comes home. I mean, clearly to Marine Circle, she was walking up the driveway and we're all really happy, but she can't stay.
She tells us she can't stay.
She can't stay. She's got to go. And she can't explain where she's been. She doesn't tell us any information. But we were all sitting around the table, and I had expressed that I had not had a dream that I could remember since she had disappeared. I still don't remember my dreams. But for many years, the only dream I would remember was this one where she would come home and couldn't stay. And I talked about it that night at the dining room table, and it turns out my dad would have the same dream and Teri would have the same dream.
And I think we all had it about the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I've had it more than once too, and it's really, really,
it's very vivid.
Yeah.
And so she visits with you, but she cannot stay.
Yeah, she won't tell us where she's been or what's going on, but she just says she can't stay.
Yeah.
And she visits you in the form that you knew her in as a
Yeah.
She's not a spirit or
No.
Right. No, she comes walking up the driveway somehow in my dream, and we're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it!" And,
where have you been?
Where have you been? She can't tell us where she's been. I don't even know in my dream whether or not she knows that where she's been, but she knows she can't stay. So she must. Yeah, it's very strange. But the fact that we learned on that one day that we had all had the exact same dream was
really bizarre.
Yeah.
It's very striking, though, and there's a spiritual component to it as well.
Yeah. And we all cried. We all cried.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Join us again next time on Mind Over Murder as we continue our conversation with Teri Hailey Holman and Paula Hailey Meehan, sisters of Cassandra Hailey, as we discuss the Colonial Parkway murders.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawl Space Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.